Assalamualaikum and hi to everyone who is watching. I'm Adlina, and in this video, my friends Norshahila, Nurul, Hana, Syahidah and I are going to explain to you guys about a type of poetry that is quite popular, which is ode. Have you guys heard the term ode before? Yes? No? Okay, never mind. Let me briefly explain to you guys the definition of ode. Ode originally comes from a Greek word odi, meaning songs. Originally, Greek odes were poetry pieces usually performed with musical accompaniment, but as time passed on, they become gradually known as personal lyrical composition, whether sung or merely recited. However, nowadays, odes are usually related to refer to a glorification or praises towards something or someone. Now, we will continue with the historical background of oath with another member of this group, Norshahila.
Thank you, Anis. Hi, my name is Norshahila Binti Mohamad Shaini, and I will continue this presentation by explaining the historical background of oath. If you ask why, then my answer is as simple as everything has a history. You cannot understand something if you don't understand its history. Well, not only you gain information, but it makes you appreciate and enjoy oaths even more. Now let's go down the timeline of historical background together. Originating in ancient Greece, the earliest ode-like poems were written by Sappho circa 600 BC and Alcaeus circa 611 to 580 BC. The other source says that the first datable ode in history was composed by Simonides of Chios to celebrate athletic victory of Glaucus of Carystus in youth boxing match at Olympia. So we can say that odes were already exist for about 2,500 years. Then, about 20 years after its first appearance, odes were used again by a Greek poet Pindar in around 5th century BC, which will be explained later further in details. In terms of function, odes were publicly performed to celebrate victories in the great series of Greek classical games, which is known as Pan-Hellenic Games. They are the Phaeacian, the Olympian, the Nemean, as well as the Isthmian. Well, we all know that during the ancient Olympics time, they recite odes in order to celebrate the victories in it. Around the 8th to 9th centuries, great odes in pre-Islamic Arabic poetry were done in the form of qasida, and it is gradually being replaced by a shorter ghazal for backing odes. So we all know that odes were also familiar and relevant in other languages and cultures as well. Modern poets were dated from 60th century of the Renaissance period. Later, odes were favored among English Romantic poets because Elizabethan poets and dramatists brought lyric poetry into popular culture. England experienced an ode boom around 70th to 80th centuries. In the 20th, probably until 21st century, odes have been rare in English poetry. However, Ode of Remembrance by Lawrence Binyon is one of the well-known odes in modern days and usually is read during Armistice Day. Over time, the subject matter of ode has changed from celebrating athletic victories to ignoring the victory itself, perhaps as a result of contrarian approach endemic to modernism, or perhaps in search of something greater. Now, let's listen to Hana's explanation on founders.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day to you, sir. So today I am Nurul Hana and I will be talking about the founder of odes. As we all know, the ode originated in ancient Greece, and the ode was actually invented by Archilochus. However, it truly came into its own with the unparalleled odes of Pindar, which was invented around 442 BC. Meanwhile, the Horatian odes was invented around 65 BC by the poet Horace. The irregular oath, or sometimes may be known as the Cowleyan oath, was invented in the 17th century by the English poet Abraham Cowley, who studied the oaths of Pindar and attempted to emulate them. In fact, there are also poets like Alcius and Anacreon who wrote beautiful single-voice oaths, while at the same time shaping the structure into several other lyrical forms. However, Alcius, Anacreon, and Sappho oaths came closer to what modern criticism known as simply lyrical poetry. There are two Greeks that stood head and shoulders above other poets of their time. The first one was Pindar, the Greek civilization greatest lyric poet, whose 45 surviving victory oaths reverberated through time and formed the foundation of English oath writing, and Sappho, who mastered the single-voice oath and gave it a distinct feminine touch. In the 19th century, the form was resumed, and the oaths composed between 1874 and 1824 by Victor Hugo, the philosophical and religious oaths of Lamarine, and the brilliant oaths of Theodore de Banville, attest the oath's resurgence into European literature. The golden age of the German oath is associated with the late 18th century and writers such as Klopstock and Friedrich Schiller, whose Ode to Joy famously inspired the final movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. The official mode for English oaths was Horace, who used the form to write meditative lyrics and on various terms. The earliest oaths in the English language using the word in its strict form were the magnificent Epithalamium and Prothalamium of Edmund Spenser. In the 17th century, the most important original oaths in English are those of Abraham Cowley and Andrew Marvell. Centuries after antiquity, European poets, beginning with Ronsard, attempted to revive the ode as a verse form. It would not be until the Romanticism, which is an artistic movement of the 19th century, however, that truly masterful odes written in European languages would begin to emerge, such as those of Victor Hugo in French and the unparalleled odes of John Keats in English. The Christian ode was adopted in the early 19th century by John Keats for one of his most famous poems, Ode to a Nightingale. So now I'll be telling you about the poet who popularizes the ode form, and his name is John Keats. So in his brief 26 years, John Keats composed three of the world's most famous poems, which was Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on a Grecian Urn, and Ode to Autumn. Produced only 54 poems in 3 slim volumes and a few magazines. However, he has a big impact on the popularization of ode poems. Now I'm going to be talking a little bit about the 3 poems that John Keats had composed. And the first one is Ode to a Nightingale. So, a nightingale built its nest near Keats' home in the spring of 1819, and inspired by its song, Keats wrote this famous ode in a single day. In the poem, Keats described a nightingale that experiences a type of death but does not actually die. The bird is able to live through its song, a fate which is impossible for a human to achieve. The second one is Ode on a Grecian Urn. Keats believed that classical Greek art was idealistic and captured Greek virtues. This led him to writing Ode to a Grecian Urn, which has 5 stanzas of 10 lines in which he had discoursed on the design of a Grecian urn. At the time of its publication, the poem was not well received by the critics, but it is now considered as one of the greatest odes in English language. And the third one, Ode to Autumn. So the Keats wrote to Autumn after a walk near Winchester one autumnal evening. The poem marked the end of his poetic career as his efforts were not giving enough financial returns. It is Keats' most famous poem and is considered as one of the most perfect short poems in the English language. What do critics have to say about John Keats' poem? So, critics appreciate how Keats uses imagination in his poetry to represent beauty as a medium for accessing truth. Modern critics analyze Keats' work with traditional techniques, commenting on how concrete his imagery appears and the structure of his narratives. The greatest odes of the 19th century were written by Keats. After Keats, there have been comparatively few major odes in English. One most notable exception is the 4th verse of the poem For the Fallen by Lawrence Beyond, which is often known as the Ode to the Fallen or more simply as the Ode. Odes, however, are irregular in form, such as Intimations of Immorality from Recollections of Early Childhood by William Wordsworth. Keats' successors realized they couldn't top his genius, and the ode faded until English poet W.H. Auden and American Alan Tate revived it in the early 20th century.
Before we get into each type of odes, it's important for you to know and remember that there are three types of odes. Remember that three brilliant minds that were introduced by Hana just now? They are the reason why we have three types of odes. First, we have Pindaric ode. Second, we have Horatian ode. And the last one, we have Irregular ode. Now, let's get deeper into one by one. Pindaric ode. Well, Pindaric is a term that is originated in the 1930s. It is a ceremonious poem and was patterned after the songs and movements of the chorus in a Greek drama. Well, if you ask me what is chorus, it is actually will be explained later by Syahidah in the structure of this type. Then you may ask me a question like, to whom Pindaric odes were addressed to? Well, my answer is still the same. Pindaric odes were addressed to boys and young men who triumphed in the Greek classical games. Most of the time, Pindaric poems were performed with songs and dance. But have you ever thought of how are the fragments of Pindar's poems in all of the classical choral forms extant? Based on my research, it is the collection of 4 books of Phoenician odes that has influenced the poets of the Western world since their publication by Aldous Manutius in 1513. It was a few years earlier than the revival in France in the 1550s. Although the work of this form hardly survived the age of Queen Anne, I'm not sure the reason behind this as well, but at least something about Pindaric odes tradition still remain. Now let's listen to Shahidah's explanation on structure of Pindaric ode.
Thank you, Shaila. Now, before we get into the structure of the poem, we should know that a Pindaric ode was originally meant to be performed or sung with the chorus during big public events to celebrate heroic or athletic victories. Now, moving on to the structure of the poem. Firstly, we should know that a Pindaric ode consists of 3 parts repeating as a unit. What's a unit, you might ask? Well, we can assume that a unit acts as a chapter, and a Pindaric ode consists of several chapters, and each chapter has 3 parts. And remember that these 3 parts were created for it to be performed or sung. So, the 3 parts that make up the Pindaric ode are a strophe, an antistrophe, and an apode. So, a strophe, which means the turning, is the opening act that marks the first section of the choral ode. As performers chant the strophe, they move around on the stage. Next, the antistrophe, which is the second section of the triad. As the name suggests, an antistrophe means to turn back. To put it clearer, during a performance, the performers, for example, during a strophe would move from right to left, but during an antistrophe, the performers would move back from left to right. Lastly, the apode. The apode originated from the Greek word apodes, means sung or said after. The apode is the closing act where the performers stand still as they chant the apode. Now, after knowing the 3 parts, we can now have a better understanding of how the structure of a Pindaric ode looks like. When it comes to Pindaric odes, they are not limited to a fixed number of lines, stanza length, rhyme scheme, and metrical scheme. However, what makes a Pindaric ode popular is notably due to its consistency in organizing its stanzas, as well as its rhyme scheme and metrical patterns. For a strophe, it is seen that Pindaric odes usually have quatrains in a strophe, leading up to even numbers such as an 8-line stanza, 12, 16, 18, or 28 lines in a strophe. Next, the antistrophe. Using back what we have learned about the structure of a Pindaric ode and the strophe, the antistrophe is written just as how a strophe would be, as it mirrors the structure of a strophe. We should also take note that an antistrophe can be a reply for the strophe or a continuation from it. Lastly, the apode, which is the final stanza. The ode is the only part of the ode that does not follow the form of both the strophe and antistrophe. It's usually different in terms of length, rhyme scheme, and metrical patterns, and it also acts as the summary line. So we can say that the ode is a summarizing stanza that completes the ode. To provide a better understanding of the structure, let's take a look at the example. Thomas Gray, The Progress of Poesy, which is said to have the closest imitation to the original form of a Pindaric ode. Now we will take a look at the first strophe. Awake, Aeolian lyre, awake, and give to rapture all thy trembling strings. From Helicon's harmonious springs, 1,000 rills the mazy progress take. The laughing flowers that round them blow drink life and fragrance as they flow. Now the rich stream of music winds along, deep, majestic, smooth and strong, through verdant vales and stars' golden rain, now rolling down the steep amain. Headlong, impetuous, see it pour, the rocks and nodding groves rebellow to the roar. Here, the rhyme scheme that is evident here is A, B, B, A, C, C, D, D, E, E, and F, F. Now onto the antistrophe. Oh, sovereign of the willing soul, parent of sweet and solemn breathing air, enchanting shell, the sullen cares and frantic passions here dies of control. On Thracia's hills the Lord of War has curbed the fury of his car, and drought his thirsty lands at thy command. Perching on the sceptred hand of Jove, thy magic lulls the feathered king with ruffled plumes and flagging wing. Quenched in dark clouds of slumber lie the terror of his beak and lightnings of his eye. Now onto the analysis. Here we can see how it is obvious that both the strophe and the antistrophe mirror each other in terms of rhyme scheme and number of lines. Both the strophe and the antistrophe have 3 sets of quatrains in their respective verses, making it 12 lines in total. Now we will look at the ode for another comparison with the strophe and the antistrophe. Thee the voice, the dance obey, tempered to thy warbled lay. Over Idalia's velvet green the rosy crowned loves are seen. On Cyntaria's day, with antic sports and blue-eyed pleasures, frisking light in frolic measures. Now pursuing, now retreating, now encircling troops they meet, to brisk notes in cadence beating, glance their many twinkling feet. Slow melting strains their queen's approach declare, where'er she turns the grace homage pay, with arms sublime that float upon the air, in gliding state she wins her easy way. Over her warm cheek and rising bosom move the bloom of young desire and purple light of love. And that is the ode. Here we can see how the ode does not share any similarities in terms of forms and rhyme scheme when compared to the strophe and the antistrophe. The ode is made up of 17 lines, while the antistrophe and the strophe have 12 lines in their respective verses. Even in the first quatrain, the ode does not have the same rhyme scheme as both the strophe and the antistrophe, wherefore them is ABBA, while the ode AABB. So for an overview, a Pindaric ode is made up of several units, and each unit has 3 parts, which are the strophe, antistrophe, and ode. Both the strophe and the antistrophe share the same form except for the ode. Both the strophe and the antistrophe share the same number of lines, stanza length, rhyme scheme, and metrical patterns, while the ode does not. And now we will move on to the Horatian ode.
Next, the second type of ode is Horatian ode. It is named after the 1st century BC Latin poet Horace. It is more reflective and intimate compared to the heroic odes of the Greek poet Pindar. Horace introduced this early Greek lyric into Latin by adapting Greek styles, but he reminded Latin writers not to copy Pindar. And then the single voice style became a favorite of the Romans. But Gaius Valerius, Catullus, Horace, and others dispatched with the music and turned it into highly personalized spoken word poetry. Catullus' pioneering ode of unrequited yet celebrated love for his secret amour, the wife of a Roman senator, are among the most painful romantic work in ancient literature. In later periods, when technical appropriateness was more highly regarded than spontaneity and imagination, Horace's odes were imitated. And then, during the Renaissance period, when several Italian poets, including Pierre de Ronsard, revived Pindaric structure but improvised it into a strictly spoken word. Well, it is because the ode's basis as a musical form was downgraded to antiquity. In the 16th century, Sir Edmund Spenser introduced the Horatian ode to the blossoming English poetry scene with a pair of marriage hymn. Later, in the 17th century, Nicholas Boileau and John de La Fontaine preserved the Horatian tradition. Enough with the history, now let's move on to the structure of Horatian ode.
Okay, so while Pindaric odes were usually written for a celebration of gods or events, the subjects for Horatian odes were more personal in nature, people, or abstract concepts. And while the form of a Pindaric ode is long and consists of the three stanza system, which are the strophe, antistrophe, and epode, a Horatian ode does not. It is a standard poem with repeated stanza patterns. Now let's take a look at the structure of the Horatian ode, shall we? The thing about a Horatian ode is that it is known for being a homostrophic ode. And what is a homostrophic ode, you might ask? Well, a homostrophic ode means that all the stanzas share the same form, depending on the choice of the poet. So this means that all the stanzas share the same number of lines, length, rhyme scheme, and meter. This is just as how we learn about the strophe and the antistrophe, right? But remember that a Pindaric ode is not a homostrophic ode because of the existence of the epode. Remember that it doesn't share any similarities with the strophe and the antistrophe. While for Horatian ode, on the other hand, all the stanzas share the same pattern. So let's take a look at the example for a better understanding. So we will use the poem An Horatian Ode upon Cromwell's Return from Ireland, written by Andrew Marvell, for an example. We will use the first two stanzas from the poem for a clearer understanding of how the structure looks like. The forward youth that would appear must now forsake his muses dear, nor in the shadows sing his numbers languishing. 'Tis time to leave the books in dust, and all the unused armors rust, removing from the wall the corset of the hall. Now let's take a look at the analysis. As we can see here, there are two rhyming couplets in both stanzas. Both line 1 and line 2 in each stanza uses an iambic tetrameter, while line 3 and line 4 uses an iambic trimeter and are indented. From here, we can see how both the two stanzas share similarity in terms of meter, rhyme scheme, and even form, therefore making it a Horatian ode. Another example that we can use is the Ode on Solitude, written by Alexander Pope. Also taking the first two stanzas from the poem, this is another example of a Horatian ode. Happy the man whose wish and care a few paternal acres bound, content to breathe his native air in his own ground, whose herds with milk, whose fields with grain, whose flocks supply him with attire, whose trees in summer yield him shade, in winter fire. Now let's move on to the analysis on the poem. As we can see here, the poet uses an alternating rhyme scheme, but still ensures that the stanzas are all the same. Line 1, 2, and 3 for both stanzas are in tetrameter, while for line 4 in both stanzas are in dimeter. So yes, we finally got through the structure of a Horatian ode. So let's take a short recap, shall we? To conclude, a Horatian ode is made up of stanzas that share the same number of lines, length, rhyme scheme, meter, and also even forms. A Horasian ode can differ in terms of rhyme scheme, forms, lines, length, and meters as long as every stanza shares the same features as the one before it. So basically that's the end of our Horasian ode journey. Now let's move on to Shahidah to talk about the history of irregular odes.
Now we have reached the last type of ode, which is irregular ode. It is also known as Kollian ode, which is named after Abraham Coley, who imitated Pindaric style and matter but disregarded strophic triad. Do you still remember what is strophic triad? It's okay, never mind. Well, it was introduced in 1656, just like the ancient Greek odes. In the 70th to 80th centuries, English odes were set to music as well. Famous composers like Purcell, Boyce, and Handel were familiar when it comes to English odes music. Although there is nothing much can be found on the internet regarding irregular odes history, but it doesn't mean it didn't hit English literature studies as significant as the other two types of odes. This time, I'll pass this presentation to Anis for the structure of irregular.
Now we are going to talk about irregular ode. Irregular ode is identified by its irregularity of verse, stanza structure, and by the lack of correspondence between parts. The structure of irregular ode is different from Pindaric or Horatian ode. Unlike Horatian ode, irregular does not employ a 2 or 4 line stanza, just like a typical structure of a Horatian ode. Besides that, contrasting from Pindaric ode, irregular ode does not have the 3-part forms. Remember, Pindaric ode has a strophe, the opening, antistrophe, the mirroring stanza, and an epode, the concluding stanza that often has different length and meter than the antistrophe and strophe. You will not likely see this strict pattern in irregular odes because irregular odes could vary in line lengths, number of lines, meter, and rhyme depending on the poet's will. Why? Because an English poet, Abraham Crowley, a notable 17th century poet who got inspiration from Pindar, relaxes the structure of irregular ode even more, making it less strict. Furthermore, irregular ode is also known as Kollian ode. To help you guys understand irregular ode better, I'm going to give you guys 2 examples of irregular poems coming from 2 different poets. First, we will look at John Keats' popular poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, Sylvan historian who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. What leaf-rich legend haunts about thy shape, of deities or mortals or of both? In Tempe or the dales of Arcady, what men or gods are these? What maidens loath? What man pursueth? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wide ecstasy? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, hear soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but more endeared. Pipe to the spirit deities of no tone. Fair youth, beneath the trees thou canst not live. Thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare, but lover, never, never canst thou kiss. Though winnie near the cold, yet do not grieve. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. And next is a poem from William Wordsworth, Intimations of Immortality. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth's and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light. The glory and the freshness of a dream, it is now as it hath been of yore. Then wheresoe'er I may, by night or day, The things which I have seen, I now can see no more. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. The mood does with delight. Look round her, when the heavens are bare. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious birth, but yet I know, where'er I go, that their hearts path away a glory from the earth. The first poem has 10 lines in both stanzas. As you can see, the rhyme scheme for both stanzas is different. The first one is A, B, A, B, A, C, D, E, C. Meanwhile, the second one is A, B, A, B, C, D, E, C, E, D. It is metered in iambic pentameter. Meanwhile, the second poem does not have the same amount of lines as the first poem is. It has 9 lines each, and both stanzas have different rhyme scheme. The first one is A, B, A, B, A, C, D, D, C, and the second one is A, B, C, B, C, D, E, D. This shows how the irregular oath poems could vary depending on the poets themselves. Now, as this discussion is coming to an end, I will do a recap briefly so that everything that we have learned today will not be forgotten. Firstly, oaths were originally poetic pieces performed with musical accompaniment, but today it is related to refer to praises or glorification of a thing or someone. Next, please remember that oath exists since centuries ago and its function has changed over time. And oath has 3 types, which are Pindaric, Horatian, and also irregular oath. For a Horatian oath, all stanzas share the same pattern and structure, which is why Horatian is known as homostrophic oath. Meanwhile, Pindaric oath is made up of 3 parts, which is strophe, antistrophe, and an apod. Apod is the only one that is different from the other 2. Moving to the last type of oath, which is irregular. Irregular follows neither the form of Horatian or Pindaric oath. Who are the founders of oath? We can see that Pindar was the first person to invent the structure of oath, followed by Horace and Abraham Cowley, who took the idea of making irregular oath by studying Horatian oath. That's all for our recap.
In conclusion, oaths have indeed existed for a long time and have definitely influenced poetry for thousands of years. Oaths also has given us some of the most legendary poems of all time. Oaths is a type of lyrical poetry wherein poets utilize a specific metrical pattern and rhyme scheme to express their respectable and grand sentiments in genuine and sometimes theatrical tone. Since the topic of oaths are inspiring and grand, they have universal appeal. Likewise, by utilizing great and remarkable style, artists attempt to make fantastic and raise sorts of tributes. Here and there, tributes might be silly, yet they are consistently astute, expected to investigate significant subjects and perceptions identified with human relations, feelings, and faculties. Thank you.